Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, breaking news: an IDF soldier wounded in a stabbing attack in the Jordan Valley. Meanwhile, German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier arriving in Israel to meet with top Israeli officials and to pay his respects at Yad Vashem. And finally, the IDF and Israel aerospace industries revealing the Jaguar, a groundbreaking semi-autonomous robot. An IDF soldier has been moderately wounded in the West Bank today in a stabbing attack near a bus stop by her military base. The suspected terrorist reportedly starting the attack by trying to steal the soldier's weapon. Then, amid the resulting struggle, the terrorist stabbed the soldier in the back, successfully stole the firearm, and attempted to flee on foot. Security forces nearby, however, quickly catching up to and apprehending the suspect, while the victim was airlifted to nearby hospital. Paramedics saying she was moderately wounded, but is stable. Meanwhile, in Florida, the latest update from authorities in Surfside reporting the death toll rising by 6 on Wednesday to 18. And this including 42-year-old Anaeli Rodriguez and her 2 young daughters aged 10 and 4. The remains of the girl's father, for his part, being pulled out earlier on Saturday. But a full week since the disastrous collapse of a 12-story condominium in northern Miami, rescue workers are still active around the clock. The crews remaining hopeful that some survivors may yet be found.
So I've been a trauma surgeon for around 11 years, and this has been emotionally the most difficult thing I ever had to endure. I think a lot of us, including myself, a lot of our task force members who I work with are separated from these missing people by only 1 or 2 degrees.
I would say as long as we are operating in a rescue mode, which we currently are, the hope is there. Even if it's just 1 more. If it's 5 more, great, but if 1 more is, that would make all the difference in the world this late in the game.
Everyone that's here is fully dedicated to this operation, to this mission. Everyone here is 100% professional, have a huge array of expertise. We have a really well diverse rescue team. And we are working 24/7, and we haven't taken a break, and we will not take a break until every last stone is removed.
Now, speaking of disaster, firefighters in Haifa's Mount Carmel region finally gaining control over the flames that broke out in the area Wednesday. Haifa Fire Services Commander Chezi Levy saying several buildings were saved, including a nursery. Before being extinguished, though, occupants in at least 4 nearby buildings forced to evacuate, with several apartments within them getting damaged. Also, at least 4 people have received treatment for smoke inhalation. And as for the cause, no specific spark has yet been discovered, but officials tentatively pointing to the extreme and ongoing heat wave, which has already led to other fires just earlier this week. German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier arriving in Israel Wednesday, the 3-day-long official state visit, including meetings with new Israeli leadership and a visit to the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial. Hannah Rifkin with the details.
Arriving in Israel and heading down to Jaffa on Wednesday, German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier setting the tone for his visit to Israel, with a call to action against rising anti-Semitism, and Steinmeier, a close ally to Israel, only getting started. The president discussing coronavirus responses, support for 2-state negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, a continuing determination for preventing Iran from getting nuclear arms, and a great concern over the sharp rise in anti-Semitism seen around the world, particularly amid the 11-day conflict with Hamas in Gaza in May. Additionally, Steinmeier set to visit the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial and meet with members of the Israeli government, new and old, like outgoing president and close personal friend Reuven Rivlin, incoming President Isaac Herzog, and new coalition partners Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and Foreign Minister Yair Lapid.
זכיתי להכיר אותך אדם לבבי וחם, אינטליגנטי. אוי, כמה אינטליגנטי. רגיש ואנושי. כן, זכינו בחבר אמת. תודה לך ידידי.
Steinmeier was scheduled to visit Israel last year, but had to postpone the visit due to the coronavirus pandemic. This is his first official visit abroad since the start of the pandemic.
Moving on, the United Nations Security Council meeting yesterday to discuss its biannual report on the controversial Iran nuclear deal. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres calling on the U.S. to remove its sanctions on Iran in order to sway the Islamic Republic to rejoin the agreement. But how willing is the United States to agree to this recommendation, and how do these developments affect Israel? Joining us with insights is ILTV's Asaf Nissan. So Asaf, thank you so much for being with us again. Now, are we about to see the end of sanctions on Iran?
No. In my opinion, we're still going to see sanctions on the table, still going on until the Biden administration decides to let go. Despite the request from UN Secretary General Guterres, we're still not going to see any restrictions being lifted.
So wouldn't that endanger the re-signing of the deal in its entirety?
I mean, it would, and there were sources that were coming out saying that the U.S. is willing to lift some of the sanctions in order to ease the decision on Iran, but the U.S. so far has stood on its back heels and decided not to go for it.
All right, now we've been seeing reports as well from the UN Security Council having met yesterday regarding Iran and the United States. What was the outcome of those discussions?
The outcome itself was pretty much the same. Both sides are standing on their backs and not willing to go any side towards the other, any situation towards the other. The U.S. is still on its back heels saying we're not going to lift the sanctions. Iran is still fighting for the fact they want to lift the sanctions. And in between the mix, you see the different states as the European Union, Russia. You see all of them still trying to play a role in the Vienna talks. But so far, it doesn't look like any success.
Not budging either way. All right, well, so Iran, in addition to sanctions being one of their top issues, they've also apparently now conditioned the deal, among other things, on the United States promising never to back out again. Is that something that we're likely to see? Does the White House really have any objection to this?
I presume not, but you can never know. I mean, then again, when Obama signed the JCPOA in 2015, no one would expect Donald Trump in 2018 to resign from it. So you cannot hold the U.S. 100% accountable on that. Because then again, someone like Trump, someone like Nikki Haley, someone more on the conservative side and against Iran would not want to stay on the table.
All right, well, I think we could probably hope that if such a line item would be added to the deal, at least it would have maybe some extenuating circumstances.
It would have to.
That would provide for the possibility to leave, if Iran broke the deal for some reason. Moving on to Israel, we see that Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has been criticized pretty consistently by the opposition about his Iran policy. What is so different about his policy as opposed to that of the Netanyahu administration?
There's no difference. Honestly, there's no difference, and the only reason you see this is a lot of fights, and it's a lot of ego fights from the opposition, still going with their same threat that will topple the government, and the new government is not doing a good job, and it's not going to uphold the same laws and principles that we held up.
So what are we seeing from, for example, Foreign Minister Lapid having met with Secretary of State Blinken?
I mean, when Lapid met with Secretary of State Blinken, he said it, that we're not going to budge, we're not changing our position. The only thing they're looking for is just a quieter way to do things under the radar, not like Netanyahu when he went back in 2015 to the House of Representatives and literally started fighting there wide openly, the Obama administration, telling them, I don't agree with the deal. They're trying to do it in a more subtle way, in a more substantial way that would make better results.
All right, Asaf Nissan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Now back in the Palestinian Authority, protesters' anger towards Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is growing fast. The demonstrations calling for Abbas's resignation erupting after a popular outspoken critic of the regime was killed in police custody. And the Palestinian Authority security forces, their subsequent crackdown on the protests only making things worse, amid reports of plainclothes officers slipping through the crowds to beat and intimidate both rallygoers and journalists alike. Here to analyze is Israeli journalist, attorney, and author of Industry of Lies, Ben-Dror Yamini. Ben-Dror, thank you so much again for being with us. What successes or lack thereof do you predict coming out of these protests?
Well, we know how things begin. We have no idea how it's going to finish, to end. everything is possible under the circumstances because let's remember one thing, the Palestinian Authority is not that strong. I mean, of course, they have the security forces, but it doesn't mean that they can really oppress whatever they want, whenever they want. It's not, I mean, and the images that are coming from Ramallah and from other cities are quite bothering because we have to think about the options that the alternative is going to be much worse. For the moment, they still have control, but it might go out of hands and everything might happen, everything.
So I want to get to maybe some of the predictions for the outcomes in a moment, but coming back to the crackdown, if it continues to become more and more aggressive, as we've been seeing over the last couple of days, could the response from the protesters amount to a neo-Arab Spring?
Well, it is right now, but 1 week time is not enough in order to estimate if it's going to be like a new Arab Spring. And I think everyone remembers exactly what happened with the Arab Spring. The outcome is not so positive. So yes, it is the beginning of the Arab Spring, but maybe, just maybe, when people know exactly what it might lead to, and the meaning might be, for example, the Hamas rule over the West Bank, I'm not sure that that's exactly what people want.
All right, so what exactly do the protesters, the Palestinians, largely want? And would that desire line up with the reality that you think might occur if they were successful in actually getting Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas to resign?
I'll tell you, there are some figures who are quite popular among the Palestinians. And before everyone else is Marwan Barghouti, who is right now in jail. But according to all the polls, if he will run for presidency, he is going to win. What will happen? What Israel is going to do? Will they let him go out of jail? Nothing is clear right now. And the other alternative is, of course, the Hamas. But what people want is more freedom. Let's not forget that something happened because of the connection with Israel, because of the friction with Israel. It's not only, checkpoints and that kind of thing. I mean, what they see from Israel is a liberal country, a democracy. Yes, maybe they are under occupation, but so many connections with Israelis, with Israeli human rights organizations, with so many activists, and they, in a way, want to be somehow to enjoy this kind of freedom of speech. They do not have it, and some. Kilometers from Ramallah, people are living freely and they can say whatever they want against the government. And they just saw what happened in Israel. I mean, in last election. I mean, the big Netanyahu, the strongest leader in the Middle East, he was removed from office.
So they're inspired, really, in a sense.
Of course, they are inspired by whatever is happening from Israel. It's not only political. It's not only, occupier and occupied. I mean, the relationship between Israel and the Palestinians is much more complicated.
All right, Ben-Dol Yamini, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for having me.
All right, over a month has passed now since the conflict between Israel and the Hamas terror group in Gaza, a conflict largely referred to as Israel's first war of artificial intelligence. And the bar is only getting higher. So against the backdrop of the war and the Israeli military's multi-year momentum program, the IDF's Gaza division is developing a first-of-its-kind semi-autonomous robot. Say hello to the Jaguar, a groundbreaking robotic ground vehicle developed by the IDF and Israel Aerospace Industries. And it serves as both a substitute for soldiers on the border and in the line of fire, and as a major advancement to the military's defense capabilities. The Momentum program is focusing on transforming the military into a high-tech force to be reckoned with. As such, the robot is rigged with dozens of sensors, an automated driving apparatus, and a public address system. It's also armed with a 7.62 millimeter mag machine gun, and it even has the ability to self-destruct should the Jaguar ever be captured by an enemy. The real X factor, though, of this robot lies in its semi-autonomy. with the Jaguar being able to self-drive and bypass obstacles on its own, all while IDF soldiers maintain full operational control if they want to from afar. In a statement, the IDF saying that the Jaguar is one of the most innovative ground robots in the Smart and Deadly Border Project in the Northern Division of the Gaza Strip. In other news, the month of June ending as one of the busiest months ever for Israeli companies. A handful of Israeli businesses hitting Wall Street last month with record IPOs and SPAC mergers, earning a combined valuation of over $37 billion. Notable earners including Monday.com, which started the month of success, raising over $700 million with a company valuation of $6.8 billion. Then other major names like Payoneer, Taboola, and IronSource, likewise raising record amounts of capital in the market following their signing of massive mergers. Payoneer, now valued at $3.3 billion, Taboola at $2.6 billion, and IronSource at over $11 billion, the largest SPAC merger with an Israeli company all year. And now, as more and more Israeli companies, especially in high-tech, make it big on Wall Street, a massive shift is also beginning to set in Israel's local high-tech labor force. With me to discuss is value creation expert with the Academic College of Tel Aviv Jaffa, Alex Coleman. Dr. Coleman, thank you so much for being with us. Now, before we get to the topic of workforce, let's focus on some of the recent Israeli IPOs and mergers in June 2021, worth over $37 billion. Can you describe the factors that paved the way for this record month?
Well, you're asking me about the secret sauce that accounts for us Israel being the startup nation. Well, I think that the major component is chutzpah, basically looking at business arenas and coming up with ideas how to do things better, even though things have been done a certain way for many, many, many years, how we can do things much better. And as a result, we've seen many Israeli companies being facing initial public offerings. Another reason is Israel's expertise in the cyber arena. Due to the COVID pandemic, there was a massive situation of cyber attacks over people working from home, and Israel was leading this area of the new cyber architecture. So as a result, we've had great success in this area.
All right, so moving on to the workforce. Globe's Israel is reporting a boom in hiring of non-developers and other non-techies and ancillary employees, and with increasingly higher competitive salaries as well. Why the sudden shift in hiring practices? Are there more Israeli companies staying in Israel rather than selling to giant multinationals, for example?
Well, one aspect is that there's a shortage, acute shortage in programmers, actually hardcore programmers. So you need other people to offload the load from them. Another problem is that programmers are very good at programming. They're not very good business from the point of the user and understanding how to do things. And these people that you just mentioned, people who are project managers or people who manage communities, many of these applications deal with communities where you need to do customer success, to help people who have difficulty joining your network, to actually join the company and create what we call network effect. Network effect means when I benefit from your being in my network, such as with Waze, the fact that we have more and more users provides me with more accurate estimate of my driving time. So there's significant number of people who are non-programmers who can either understand the application from the point of view of the user, who can help users join the system so that there's more and more customers or users of the system and the system becomes more valuable, and to specify requirements to the programmers who, being good programmers, are able to actually convert that into hard code.
All right, Dr. Alex Coleman, thank you so much. All right, and if you'd like to see the full interview with myself and Dr. Alex Coleman, please go online to ILTV.tv or search ILTV on YouTube and Facebook. Moving on, people living and raising a family outside of their home country are often faced with certain extra requirements, anything from filing foreign income taxes to registering children as citizens born abroad, and the latter being particularly important for Israelis living in the States, so that the kids can avoid major issues down the line. That said, sometimes these things are left undone, especially with Israel's confusing bureaucracy. So joining us with some legal insight is advocate Michael Decker. name partner of Cohen, Decker, Pex, and Brosh law offices. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, first off, is a child born abroad to Israeli parents or even to one Israeli parent considered an Israeli citizen automatically?
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for having me. The answer is that by law, according to the citizenship law of Israel, then yes, a child of an Israeli parent is a citizen by birth. However, it's not automatic in the sense that that maybe de facto you're a citizen, but technically speaking, you need to register the birth at the Israeli embassy, and that doesn't happen all the time.
So why is it necessary to register at the embassies? What are the benefits maybe of gaining that Israeli citizenship, and what are the consequences of not registering?
First of all, many people just don't register just out of lack of knowledge. They just don't know that they have to register the birth within a month after the birth, and if a long time passes afterwards, it becomes difficult because the embassy may require evidence and so on and so forth. But I think now during the corona, this became a huge fiasco even because in order to approve entry to Israel of people, the requirement is that if you're a citizen de facto, meaning if your parents are citizens, the embassy requires that you have a passport to enter. So you have whole families that are basically stuck in the States. I know you have whole groups that are trying to even put pressure on the government to allow them in, of Israelis basically, and they're not allowed in because they never registered their children on time. So this became a huge situation there, but there are other issues that always arise, like for example, if someone was never registered and then he tries to visit at age 18, all of a sudden he discovers that he's supposed to serve in the army and he never even dealt with that, or he's supposed to come in with a passport and they ask him at the border questions and they give him problems leaving without an Israeli passport. So it's important to be registered.
Believe it or not, I actually know some of these consequences personally. But so would it ever be necessary to actually test paternity or maternity DNA?
It becomes relevant mainly when only the father is an Israeli citizen and the mother is not. Or let's say the mother is not an Israeli citizen and also not entitled to immigrate to Israel. Let's say she's not Jewish or a descendant of a Jew or not entitled to immigrate according to the law of return, then you don't always know that the father is the father. You always know that the mother is the mother. Usually the father is registered as the father as a presumption, actually, and that's an accepted presumption all over the world. So when it's only the father is an Israeli citizen and the mother is not, then sometimes the embassy will require a paternity test. This also becomes relevant if a registration never occurred. And the child wants to register himself when he's 16 only, or like 15 or 16, then the embassy may require, for example, evidence like birth documents from the hospital, not only the birth certificate. And if that's not possible to present, then the embassy may require an actual paternity test from the court in Israel.
All right, so it sounds like there are a lot of reasons to absolutely not delay and not neglect these responsibilities with this citizenship issue. And of course, everybody watching at home, if you have any of these issues or questions about citizenship or registration, please contact the law offices of Cohen, Decker, Pex, and Brosh. Michael, thank you so much for being with us again.
With pleasure.
All right, and now before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. This makes sense. Clear the runway. We have a very important family that needs to travel. Hey, are they vaxxed? Do they have their PCR tests? Can somebody stop them? Somebody get on that? Ben Gurion Airport letting another family leak through. All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.26 shekels to the American dollar and 2.63 shekels to the Canadian dollar. And finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much for watching.